This video is going to be painful for everyone. So many people, how are you doing? And welcome back to a new video. The other day, I did the best Charlton 11 of the decade, in my opinion. Today, we're going to be doing the worst Charlton 11 of the decade. It's not been great, to be honest, over this last decade. Stuck in League One constantly. Terrible ownerships, terrible football, and just god-awful footballers. I'm going to be comprising a starting 11, subs bench, and a manager, like I did for the best Charlton 11 of the decade video. I'm going to be using the 4-4-2 formation, like I did in the previous video. So, without any further hesitation, strap yourselves in, people. It's going to be a long and painful one, but let's get it over and done with. So, starting off in between the posts, quite possibly the easiest choice of this entire team. The keeper in question is Johann Thuram. Starting off brilliantly, ain't we? So this was at the very prime of Roland Duchâtelet's ownership of the club, right at the start of his regime. In 2014, of course, he buys the club. Power, then Charlton manager. The club's currently sitting in the relegation zone, and Duchâtelet sends a lovely email to Chris Powell telling him that you need to sign a goalkeeper, right back, right mid, and striker for your team. Didn't take into account what Chris Powell wanted as the manager. He just said, this is what you want and this is what you're getting. Roland then proceeded to bring in some players from his network of clubs that he owned. One player that came over was Johann Thuram, who joined the club on loan from Standard Liège, who were by far the biggest club that Roland owned at the time, as they were consistently competing in Europe for Europa League and Champions League. Chris Powell was ordered via email by Duchâtelet to play Thuram over Ben Hamer, who at the time was an established championship keeper and was my best keeper of the decade. Rather than me describe Thuram's time at the club and how he played, I'd rather just show you.
It's back to Thuram, he's giving it straight to Mayiga. It's going to be a goal for QPR, he's won the ball out. From the goalkeeper, and he's off the crossbar, I think, and somehow Charlton get it away. Carry on, coming forward here, he's having a go from the opening. Carry on. Desma, oh, he's having a go, it goes in. Yes, it's in for Wigan. Gomez! What a turnaround!
So we move on now to the defence, starting off with left back. Now, I was torn between two players, and you guys will probably know who one of those options were. I know he's been poor, I know I don't like him, I know most Charlton fans don't really like him, but I've gone with someone who I think was equally, if not worse, than Purrington, and that was Morgan Fox. Fox was a product of the Charlton Academy, and he made over 100 appearances for the club. And he was an absolute disaster. He was constantly getting skinned, his passing was terrible, yet he was consistently being picked in the starting 11, especially during the 2015-16 season, which was an absolute disaster of a season, as I've mentioned several times. I cannot tell you how happy I was to see him leave the club in 2017. What astonished me is that he was picked up by Sheffield Wednesday, who were in the Championship, which I didn't know what they were thinking. I literally did not know what they were thinking. And he's still in the Championship now, playing for Stoke City. I never really rated him whatsoever. He was absolute joke, and yeah, glad he went. Moving on to the centre-backs, starting off with the captain of the squad, Roger Johnson.
Prick Wanger!
Roger Johnson was Charlton's highest-rated player on FIFA 15, rated at 71. Johnson had two different stints at the club. I think they were both very short-term contracts, and he didn't play all too many games for us. He signed in 2015 during the 2014-15 season, and then he signed again in 2016 in the 2015-16 season because of the injuries that we had and the lack of squad that we had. We brought him in on a short-term contract, and Johnson was being, I think he played a couple of games during that championship season, and he started a couple of times in League One as well. I'm just going to tell you two instances that justify him being in this squad. First of which was the 4-3 defeat at home to Reading during the 2015-16 season. By far the most traumatic game of football I've watched down at the Valley. Reading go 3-1 up through Ola Jean. Rather than give some encouragement to the rest of the team, who needed it at the time as they were in the thick of a relegation battle, he proceeds to scream and swear at the rest of the players like, "What's going on? You're And I was sat in the East Stand at the time watching this game, so I could hear everything word for what he was saying. It was completely out of order. And the second instance was the first game of the season later. Fans, they took the trek up to Bury, very long trip, there and back. Got our asses handed to us. The fans booed the players off. Justified, because obviously they travelled all that way up and they've got to travel all the way back home. Miserable. Johnson decided it was a great idea to walk up to the travelling Charlton fans in the away end and told them to fuck off. This was followed by quite possibly the most brain-dead comment any footballer could say to their own fans. If you don't like it, don't come and watch it.
What'd you just say?
He was an absolute prick. And he was just bad. He was just bad, and his attitude on that pitch more than justifies him being the captain of this team. He was an absolute disaster for us. And partnering him in the centre-back position is another centre-back that was brought in the latter stages of the 2015-16 season, that being Rod
Fanny.
So when Charlton signed him, you would think, okay, they've got some decent solidity in the back now, and that could help them out stay up. The problem was, though, Fanny was 34, 35 at the time we signed him, and the team we signed him from was a team that was playing in Qatar. For me, that's an instant red flag. Bambi on ice. He was Bambi on ice in that background. He literally looked like he was 5'7", weighed 200 pounds, just being skinned constantly all the time. Signing a player from Qatar on loan as a 35-year-old and you're looking to stay in the Championship. You just don't do it. You don't do it. And completing the back four in the right-back position. Now, I have to be honest, I was going to put a centre-back in at right-back because I didn't know what right-back to put in the team. I literally didn't know because we haven't had that many bad right-backs, to be honest. So, and thanks to you guys' suggestions on Instagram, I've now found a right-back. So the centre-back that I was going to put in at right-back is now on the bench, and you're going to see him in a minute. And the right-back that is in the team is Loic Nego. I did know about Nego, and I didn't want to put him in the team because I hadn't seen him play personally. After doing my own research, I discovered that no one actually saw Nego play because he made just the one appearance for the football club. Now, you may think that's slightly harsh. He's only played one game. Why is he in the worst 11 of the decade? The reason being is because we paid money for this guy. This guy was a permanent transfer brought over from Ujpest, a team that Roland owned in Hungary. That in itself just gets him in this worst 11 of the decade because, as I say, we pay a fee for him. We pay a fee for him to play games. Another player coming over from the network of clubs plays one game. He gets in this team easily. As we get into the midfield, starting off on the left-hand side, we have Sule Kaikai. I think this is the worst winger I have seen play for this football club, and genuinely think he might be the worst winger of all time that has ever played for the club. Kaikai was a unproven talent from Crystal Palace, brought him in on loan from there, Holmes' replacement, and was said to be a decent player, a player with a lot of flair, a lot of technicality, a lot of pace, and he had to rival Tariq Fosu. Kaikai was just awful. He was just awful. I remember so vividly the final game of that season, played against Rochdale. We lost 1-0, and News Shopper gave him a mark of 1 out of 10 for his performance that game. That just purely summed up his entire time at Charlton. He literally had no sort of pace or skill whatsoever, no sort of effort. And following his loan spell with us, he was released by Crystal Palace, which was, I mean, yeah, well done Palace for doing that. And he ended up at NAC Breda in the Dutch division, making his return to England and signing for Blackpool, where he's actually done rather well for himself, consistently playing at League One level and has turned himself into a decent League One player. So fair play to him for that, but he was just an absolute disaster when he played for us, and he gets into his team again rather easily. Just reading these next two players' names out is going to be painful. These two are by far the worst players in this team by a country mile. Starting off with the first centre midfielder, we have Christophe Lapointe, the midfielder who didn't know where midfield was. This guy was a permanent transfer. Again, this guy was a permanent transfer, paid a fee for him. He come over from Ghent. Lapointe come over during the 2014-15 season. He made one start and come off the bench 5 times. Now, me personally, I haven't seen him play, so I'm just going off what everybody else has said and what everyone else has seen. He could quite possibly be the worst transfer of the decade. He could quite possibly be the worst transfer. The geezer just did not know where midfield was. He was an absolute disaster, run around like a headless chicken. And again, was just another another player that come over from Belgium and was a flop in the Championship. It really was. And Jesus Christ, just the sheer memory of this guy's name. I genuinely don't know how this guy's still a professional footballer. He's playing in Belgium, I believe, right now. It's either there or Hungary, somewhere there. But I don't know how he's a professional footballer. And partnering him is the player that I'm going to give the award for the worst signing of the decade and the worst player in this list. Hajibar. Thing that I can't comprehend with this signing is where we signed him from. We got him on a free transfer from Sunderland. This guy was playing for a Premier League club when we brought him in. And that just astonishes me. It absolutely astonishes me. How was he playing in the Premier League when we signed him? Because honestly, he was a donkey. Horror show. He was... there's no other way I can describe it. After Ola John scored the third goal and after Johnson had screamed at the rest of the team, straight from kickoff, the ball is kicked to Bar, and Bar literally just gets the ball, turns facing our goal, so the ball's there and he's standing there with his back to Reading's goal. And he just shields the ball. He just stands there. He just stands there shielding the ball, turning around the ball, not moving the ball, just turns around and he gets dispossessed. His contract was terminated after that season, so thank God for that, because I just could not bear to see him play for Charlton ever again. Bar and Lapointe could quite possibly be the worst centre midfield duo ever. And completing the midfield on the right-hand side, this one could be quite controversial because when I asked you guys for suggestions for players, none of you actually suggested this. None of you actually suggested this guy, but I've gone with him anyway. In right midfield, I've gone with Jordan Bataka. I think the only reason this guy was rated by Charlton fans is that he had pace and he had 5-star skill moves on FIFA. That's it. That is it. He came over to the club on a season-long loan from Leeds United in the 2016-17 season, brought in by Russell Slade. And initially, there was a lot of hype and excitement about him as he was a very skillful, technical player, apparently, with a lot of pace, apparently. When we played Rochdale at home, we lost that game 1-0. I was there that day. Bataka come on as a late substitute and he was booed by the Charlton fans. The Charlton fans booed him. Didn't even know he scored twice. I only knew the only goal that I knew that he scored was in our 3-3 draw, coincidentally, against Rochdale. And this was the goal that he scored. Geezer could not shoot to save his life. He could not shoot whatsoever. I know he's a winger, but he just could not shoot. If Bataka didn't have pace, I don't think he'd be a professional footballer now. I really don't. When I say he had skills, he would literally just do the occasional step over. Just do the step over in front of the player, try to beat a man, and then just wouldn't beat him, and he'd just lose the ball. But yeah, Bataka was poor, and then after his loan spell with us, he was released by Leeds, and he now currently plies his trade in Belgium. I think he plays for St. Troyden, actually, who were a club that Roland used to own. Bataka, for me, a lot of you may not have said him because, you know, you wouldn't have thought about him, but I thought about him. I think he was overhyped. And now we get on to the front two. Starting off with Pytor Parisiak. Parisiak was once again the most typical Roland signing there could be. He was brought into the club from a Dutch second division side as Jan Kermagant's replacement. We paid a fee for this spiky-haired, electrocuted twat. And like Loic Niego, he made only one appearance. He made only one appearance, and I'm pretty sure that was a substitute appearance. I'm pretty sure. I don't need to say anything more. I really don't. Really don't need to say anything more. And his partner in crime up top is Muhammed. Both of these guys, Parisiak and Hamed, failed to score a goal at their time for the club. And I do feel slightly sorry for Hamed because you could see that Hamed needed a goal. He needed a goal last season and it just didn't come for him. The first time I saw him, he, again, like Rod Fanny, he looked profusely overweight. Looked like he'd been on the beach all summer. At the turn of the new year, Hamed, you could see he'd lost a lot of weight and he looked a lot better. He was winning so many headers in the air. And like I said, he needed that goal. It just didn't come. It just didn't come. Ultimately, Hamed was poor. I do slightly feel sorry for him, but He was poor. He was poor, to be totally honest. So that concludes the starting 11 for the worst Charlton 11 of the decade. I'll run you through it again. In goal, Johann Thuram Lion. The back four of Morgan Fox, Roger Johnson as the captain, Rod Fanny and Loic Nyego. Midfield, Soleil Kaikai, Christophe Lapointe, El Hajibar and Jordan Bataka. And the front two are Pytor Parisiak and Muhammed. Moving on to the subs bench, starting off with the sub-goalkeeper. Again, this one is very controversial. I've gone with Nick Pope, and a lot of you may be like, what are you on about, Tyler? Never rated him when he played for Charlton. Never rated him. He was an absolute bag of nerves when he played for us. He was poor. He was absolutely poor. And I was astonished that he signed for Burnley, who of course got promoted the season he left us to the Premier League. And fair play to him. The centre-back that was supposed to be playing right-back until Nyego came in was Harry Lennon. Now, Lennon was another product of the academy. Never rated him when he played. He looked so slow. Bambi on ice. Absolutely terrible. Kept getting skinned constantly in the back line, and he was an absolute disaster when he played for us. That was an example of a failed product of the academy. And the other defender, no, it's not Ben Purrington, it's Naby Sarr. 2015 to 2018, Naby Sarr was an absolute clanger. He was an absolute disaster, especially in the days when we were playing him as a left back. Like, God forbid, man. The sub-midfielders, Davies gets into this squad hands down. He was an absolute disaster last season, of course, coming on a short-term loan from Birmingham City. Everyone was expecting him to be an upgrade on Darren Pratley, like a lot more physical. It was absolutely awful. Didn't look like a championship player whatsoever, and he's still playing for Birmingham now. And as for the other midfielder, it was a choice between Joe Ledley and Baram Kayal. I've gone with Joe Ledley. Not played whatsoever from the summer up until we signed him last season. He joined in December. He made his debut against Middlesbrough, the first game we played him in. He played 45 minutes, come off, never saw him since. And as for the two sub-strikers, I have gone with Josh Parker. Now that again maybe seem as quite harsh, as a lot of people did like him for his work ethic and the grit and determination that he showed for the club. But ultimately, he was brought in to replace Karlan Grant. You're a striker, you're brought in to score goals, and he didn't. He didn't score goals, so that's why he is put into this list. Don't get me wrong, his effort was admirable. He did put in 110% when he played for the club, but ultimately, he failed to score that goal for us, and that's why I get into this list. And as for the other striker, there was a lot of options, I have to be honest, but I've gone with Conor Mcelenny. Now, this guy was brought into the club on loan from Everton. I think it was a short-term loan during the 2015-16 season. I think he was 24, 23 at the time. And yeah, the geezer couldn't shoot to save his life. He could not shoot to save his life. Made 9 appearances for the club, failed to score. And because of that, his loan was actually cut short by the club. As for the manager, it has to be Karel Frye. It has to be. There is no other person I could lob into this list. This guy came in as Guy Luzon's replacement. We were in the thick of a relegation battle during that 2015-16 season. And there was a lot of backlash to this appointment. So much backlash that Roland decided to make him an interim head coach, despite the fact that this was a permanent role. It was under Frye we saw quite possibly the most embarrassing football ever. Losing to Colchester in the third round of the FA Cup, a side who were in League 2 and hadn't won a game for 3 to 4 months. Lost to Burnley 4-0 and then lost to Huddersfield 5-0 and Hull City 6-0. Those 2 games coming in the space of 3 days. No goals scored, 11 conceded in 2 games. I couldn't have anyone else to manage this worst 11 of the decade. So that is it for this video, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy this absolute horror show of a video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, subscribe if you're new around here, and turn on those post notifications so you're notified of when I post. What do you guys think of my team? Let me know in the comments below. Who would you guys have for your worst 11 of the decade? Give me your starting 11 subs and managers in the comments down below. This has been Tyler Anderson. Have a nice day, and I will see you all on Saturday for the live reaction in the El Kentico against Gillingham, as Charlton are finally back in action in League One. Take it easy, and I'll see you all later.